about putting a costume together, what are the things that you're thinking about and taking into consideration?
Well, I would say at this point, for most of the characters, we have sort of a default color scheme. Sort of color coding the characters makes them easily identifiable, even if, we have to have a new actor or actress sub in, so our continuing audience doesn't have any trouble following changes like that. But in addition to that, I am usually focused on sort of the diegesis of the character. They're standing in society, what the situation calls for. Is this a different time of day than the previous scene? Is it a different day altogether? That sort of thing. Uh, and I also sort of worry about what would the more historically minded of our audience really pick up on, like, Nathaniel wearing sleeve garters if he has to have his jacket off and he's at work, that kind of thing. Um, so those are most of the things I sort of try to keep in mind. What are the characters' relation to each other as far as the difference in their standing? We can't always go as far as we would like with perfect reproductions of costuming of the time. So sometimes it's more about making sure the costumes fit relative to each other as far as social standing goes.
Very cool. So, we are focusing today on a particular piece you created for the character of Mrs. Frost in the story
Yes.
named after her chatelaine. What is a chatelaine?
So a chatelaine was sort of a really fancy keychain slash pocket slash purse, in that it fulfilled all of those functions, but in form, it was mostly a keychain. It's often, and as we get into the Victorian era, as with so many things, we made them pretty. They weren't just to perform a function. They were also many of them also looked very nice. A woman might have many tools that she uses in the course of the day. The most common one to be put on a chatelaine is keys, especially for a housekeeper, for example. Housekeepers had their own chatelaines, and in fact, it is the item of the chatelaine is where the term for the position in the household chatelaine comes from, as keeper of the keys. I'm fairly sure I have that causality right, not the other way around. Um, but women of many standings would also wear a chatelaine, and they might keep embroidery scissors, needle cases, little things that they might use commonly through the day, uh, and wanted to have close at hand, but not bring a whole bag around their house, and their pockets. It's not that no Victorian dress had pockets, but their pockets wouldn't have been, you know, made of denim, the way that you could put a pair of embroidery scissors in your pocket and not worry about it too much. So a chatelaine was a way of keeping things close at hand without necessarily having some of the tools we do that with in modern day.
Mrs. Frost wears it with the first costume that she appears in part five. What made you think that that would be a good accessory for her to have with that particular costume?
This was a collaborative effort between me and Ariel, the actress. Actually, I believe when we were spitballing ideas about the scene. So Mrs. Frost has a very important key that appears in that scene, and it occurred to us, she wouldn't have a pocket to keep it in. She probably wouldn't actually keep it around her neck. I think that we did do that several times in that production, but it made more sense. We talked about it a little. She's like, "Well, really, she would keep it on a chatelaine." And Ariel was like, "We should do that. We should have a chatelaine." And I thought about it for a second. I'm like, "You're right. We should." And I think I can do that. And so I did. And here she is. I have her clipped to this clipboard for now, but you can see all of the various pieces. So if I was going to create a chatelaine, I wasn't just going to worry about, the key in question. I was also going to worry about all of the other little tools a person might have on their chatelaine, especially about a person like Mrs. Frost. So we've got, pocket watch, like every mini watches were common on a woman's chatelaine, especially for a woman of Mrs. Frost's age. A small looking glass for reading letters might be appropriate. And embroidery scissors are often just a very common one to include on a chatelaine, and they're very pretty, so I could not resist. And so that's what's included on Mrs. Frost chatelaine and why.
The thing that I really liked about it was there's that progression of sort of formality and majesty in her costumes as the show goes on. And
Mm.
it's almost like she's trying to sort of ramp up how intimidating she is as she goes.
Oh,
And
yeah.
whereas this, with her sort of least formal look, and it's almost like she's trying to lull Nathaniel into this false sense of security by being like, I'm just a normal woman. Look, I've got normal lady things because I've got stuff to do just like any other woman does. So it's almost like she's doing a little costume design of her own in creating this impression of, I'm not going to come on too strong in the beginning, but I'm going to ramp up that.
Oh, I agree. Frost definitely uses her image as a weapon, and sometimes the weapon is poison rather than a knife.
Exactly. So how did you made this chatelaine yourself?
Yes, I
How
did.
did you go about making it?
So the most difficult part I would say is actually the base. At the time, I think that that is a piece that you could have purchased, but we don't exactly use those anymore. So the base of a chatelaine would be large enough so that it wouldn't fall forward or anything like that, but it would be attached to either a clip or a pin. And then you would have basically anchor points where you could attach the chain and chains and so on from there. So these are all jewelry pieces that you can find in any Michaels. This is a piece from, this is like a finding that you would use to make bracelets. And to the back of it, I have glued and wired an alligator clip because it was the easiest way to make sure we weren't. I don't like to put holes through our costumes if we don't have to. Um, so the weight's not perfectly balanced on it, but it's good for a one show piece. And then all of the rest of these were um, mostly things I had, like the chain I already had. I think I did buy these findings brand new just at Michael's. They're just normal jewelry findings. You would use these also for a multi-strand bracelet. Um, but the magnifying glass I already had in the house. Uh, the pocket watch came from my collection. It stopped working a number of years ago, so it was a perfect donation for this. The embroidery scissors are new, uh, but I bought them because I wanted to use them. And the key is also just from findings I had in my house already. I tend to keep little charms and things that come off of other things for exactly this reason. They get reused in prop making and costume making sort of constantly.
And they're designed to come off and on because
Oh yeah.
somebody needs to use them. So,
Yes. The little hooks are the other thing that were new for this project is so all of these tools have a little hook that they can come off of. Well, I actually intentionally closed them so that they wouldn't come off during filming, but if I hadn't clamped them closed just enough so that the things couldn't slip off, they would be coming on and off easily. In fact, I think that the embroidery scissors will not come off easily right now, but if I force it, they will. But that makes sense because we wouldn't want that to happen during filming.
yep. Hmm.
But yes, those are just a specific type of hook jewelry clasp that I instead converted to hooks for the tools.
I also liked how it added an element of movement to the costume. They hung well, but at the same time, when she spun or when she, walked, they kind of would sway and add that little bit of dynamism to the look.
I loved that as well, and it's the sort of thing that we couldn't account for super ahead of time because this wasn't a last minute idea, but it was a shortly before Tech Week idea. So it was the sort of thing where like you couldn't account for it too far ahead of time, and in the moment, you just the balance of the thing worked really well. It wasn't super weighted on one side or the other. It swayed very nicely, and I agree. I really liked the sense of movement it gave. For something as simple as it was, I thought it had a good effect.
Yeah, it combined all the things that I love about a costume piece, that it was visually interesting. It set the scene from a time period standpoint, and it was a little bit of a storytelling moment in that Frost was wearing it in that context for a specific reason to create a specific impression.
I agree. I love this sort of piece because I feel like it's the sort of thing that, most people won't notice if it's if it's missing, they're not usually looking too hard at the details of that. But when you do notice it, you're like, oh, I like that. Oh, I didn't even think. Oh, of course, a woman like that would wear a chatelaine and keep her most important keys on it.
One extra little layer of narrative and polish to the whole
Yeah,
presentation.
I agree.
Well, thank you, Jed. I really appreciate you telling us about your process.
You're very welcome. I'm really proud of this little project and very, very happy to take any time to talk about it.
And you can see all of Mrs. Frost here on our YouTube channel at Mrs. Hawking.